Looking at the stacks of books that I have here, I'm kind of like, were you kidding? As of this moment, I've read 47 books in this year, and I've only read 8 sequels. And I think none of them were a final book. We have to change that. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. This is going to be my TBR for the final book support group. If you don't know, the Final Book Support Group is a readathon hosted by Steph from Steph Loves, and I'm going to link her announcement video and the Instagram of the Final Book Support Group down below. But it is a readathon that is sometimes a weekend, sometimes a week, sometimes even a month, that focuses on reading final book in a series. Of course, you can also read sequels or continuations or companion novels, anything to do with series where you don't start new series. And I love this because, like everybody else, I start new series, I don't really continue with them. I sometimes just need a minute to let what I've read sink in. Once I remember that I wanted to read the series, I don't really remember much of the first book, so I need to reread them, and then the whole circle starts again. So I'm always happy for this reminder to go back and look at the series that I want to read and that I want to continue. And for me, that is to not look at these shelves, but to go over there to my red shelves and see what I want to read. Because these shelves are my TBR, but only new series and standalones. So I might have the first book of a new series on here, or I have the whole series on here if I haven't started yet. But once I read the first book in a series, then the series as a whole gets moved to the other shelves, my red shelves. And then it looks a little bit like this. Then it looks like this. We have the first in a series, the second in a series, and then we have 2 books in a series that I have not read yet. Oh, this is, by the way, another one that I would love to continue. So let's put this also on the stack that I need to read, which is The Reaper at the Gates by Sabaa Tahir. Love the series, but the ending of the second book kind of made me wary about going forward. But I want to continue. First 2 books were so good. If I continue and read this, then I can put it in here like this and still have the last book of the series looking outward. But at this time, this is how it goes. So I'm really happy that Steph reminds us once in a while to go back to those series. And let's just get right into next week, because this time around it's a week-long readathon, which is perfect. 1 week is doable. So looking at the stacks of books that I have here, I'm kind of like, were you kidding? But let's go to the sequels that I really want to get to next week. The first is Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross. This is the sequel to Divine Arrivals, which is a romantasy series which has taken Booktube and Bookstagram by storm. I have been meaning to get to this one, and I really want to know what happens next, what the world building is gonna end up looking like in this one. Divine Arrivals is about a couple of reporters who are both trying to get the promotion at work, and of course they can't stand each other, but what they don't know is that they actually do already communicate with each other via magical typewriters. And all of this is set during war times, reminding of the Second World War, and that whole setting and that whole atmosphere very intrigued me in the first book, and I can't wait to get to the sequel. Next up, we have a sequel to a book that I've only recently read, and the first book was called God Killer, and this is Sunbringer by Hannah Kanna. This is set in a world where there are multiple hundreds, thousands of gods. Anything that you can think of and that you can want can bring out a god. And in the first book we follow a group of characters, including a god killer who is set out to kill as many gods as possible in order to revenge her family, and a couple other different characters that all want to get to a certain city where there are still gods roaming around, and it all blew up in the end. So I'm really happy to have this sequel in my hands and get right back into the story. The next sequel that I have is a sequel to a book that I've just finished, and that is Magic Study by Maria V. Snyder. This is the sequel, of course, to Poison Study, which is a much beloved series that has been around for a long time. I only recently got the series last year when I got this beautiful special edition set of the first 3 books done by Fairyloot, and I just finished the first one. It's not a new favorite series. I don't really think that it's gonna end up being a favorite series, because it does really feel like the early 2000s original YA kind of story, and I see the parallels to other books that were very hyped during that time. Oh. Sorry about that. I'm on sprints with Lexi. So where was I? Yes. So not a really new premise or a new kind of way of looking at characters, but I did enjoy it, and I do want to try to binge this series in a couple of weeks. So maybe I will get to the sequel, not right away, but maybe during the next week at some point. This is about a young girl who is in the dungeons in the beginning of the story. She was committed of murder and she's just waiting for her execution date when she is given the chance to avoid the news by becoming the taste tester of the commander, the ruler of this country. And she of course takes it. She hopes to find a way of escaping later, but what she doesn't know when she accepts is that she's gonna get poisoned, and if she doesn't get the antidote every day, she will die. I am really happy with the way that the story is going, and I really want to know like where this story leads in this one. I have 3 books that I don't have a physical copy of yet that I want to continue, and these are also priority reads. The first is the arc that I got for the, at this point already published, 3rd installment of the Wimple series by Charlie Ann Holmberg. The first book in the series is called Keeper of Enchanted Rooms and follows a young wizard who inherits a very haunted house in the middle of nowhere. Very fun, very cozy fantasy. I love the characters, like all of them. It also has a kind of a mystery element going on. There is like a killer on the loose whose paths cross with that of the main character. I love the book, I love the author. I also enjoyed the sequel, so I really hope that the 3rd book in the series is just as good. I think there are going to be 5 books in the series, so I can't wait for the rest of them, but first this one. The next sequel that I want to read is The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King by Carissa Broadbent. This is the sequel to The Serpent and the Wings of Night, which I flew through. That was a really big surprise for me. I did not expect to love it as much as I did, and I am already so hyped for the 2nd book. And when I heard that there was going to be a final book support group, I knew this is the book that I wanted to read for that. So I'm really hoping, and fingers crossed, that I'm gonna read this next week. And lastly, I have the ebook The Undermining of Twyla and Frank by Megan Bannon. This is the companion novel to The Undertaking of Heart and Mercy. It was my favorite book in 2022. This might very well be the follow-up in this year. I think it's gonna be released in June, but I got an early copy for this one and I can't wait to continue with this one. I started it in February and I put it down because I had other books that I needed to prioritize at that time, but I can't wait to get back to it. In this one we have a very different kind of feel to it because of what happened in the first book, but I'm not going to spoil any of that. But we have dragons in this one, so come on, of course I'm gonna love it. We already met like the first dragon and yeah, so much fun. I can't wait to share my thoughts with you on this one, and again, this is perfect for the final book support group. So those were the books that are like high on my priority list, but of course there are more sequels that I need to get to. But before I get into those possible reads, I want to quickly talk about a graphic novel series and a couple of mangas that I kind of want to read next week and kind of put them in between the more dense reads. So the graphic novel series that I want to continue is Saga. I already read the 10th volume of this, but I only read it digital, so I kind of want to get back into this, and then I want to continue with volume 11, which I have not read yet. Love this series. It is a kind of retelling of Romeo and Juliet in space, if both of them had survived and had a kid. It has explicit scenes, so be careful if you go into it, but love it. And the 3 mangas that I have, the first one is One Piece. With this one, it has been a whirlwind of emotions, because when I first read it, because Gavin loved it so much, I wasn't really happy with it, or I think I read the first volume in German, so I wasn't sure if it was like the translation. Then I watched the live action series. I am obsessed with it, so I went back and read it in English, enjoyed it more, but then I kind of never got back to reading it, so I'm hoping to continue with this one. And of course, if you don't know, One Piece is an adventure manga about a young boy who is set on becoming king of the pirates and the special crew that he assembles around himself. Next up, we have The Promised Neverland. This is the 2nd installment in this series. The first one took me by surprise by how very much disturbing it is, but I am interested to see where this is going. I don't want to say say too much or what the big surprise was in the first book, because I think you need to be surprised as well if you read it. And the last series that I want to continue is Spy Family. This is the second book in this series. I read the first one, really enjoyed it. This is about a family of assassins, spies, and a little girl who is a telepath. So those are the kind of little treats that I'm gonna have in between longer books. And now on to the many series that I wouldn't mind continuing this week. Again, these are not the only series that I want to continue or that I have on my shelves. There are many more, but when I went through my shelves and thought about what I wouldn't mind reading next week, these came up. First up, we have 3 books that would be rereads, but I've been meaning to continue with these series for a long time, so I do want to at some point get to this. Sadly, there is no place on the bingo board for rereads, which I think should be on there, because I think I'm not the only one who has to reread stuff in order to continue with the series. But we digress. So the first book, or the first series that I want to continue, is Throne of Glass. Heir of Fire is the next one that I need to reread. I have reread the first 3 installments, the first 2 books plus the short story collection last year, I think, so I'm pretty sure of what happens, and I think there is a very clear cut in the plot to this one, so it's fine to continue with this one. And like I said, the first 2 books I think I've read like 3 or 4 times at this point. I read this book and I think 2 more after this, but I have never finished the series, which is so stupid because I love this series. So I need to continue with this one and reread this one at some point in the near future, hopefully. The next book that I've been needing to read for a while is Fire by Kristen Cashore. Ever since I got these beautiful editions, I've been meaning to reread the series. I reread the first book, which is Graceling, with a friend, and we loved it. Not so much plot-wise, because it does feel very much, again, like a 2000s kind of story, but I enjoyed how ahead of its time the main character's like wishes and views of the world and what she wants out of it were in the first book, which was funnily enough what I hated when I first read it as a teenager, but loved as an adult later on. So I can't wait to see where this one takes me. I remember loving this one, and so I'm very happy to get back into this world where there are people who have magical abilities. They are considered very dangerous, and I think all the books are set in different countries on this continent. I have the same editions of the other books in the series, and I've been meaning to get back to it because there are still some newer books in the series that I haven't read yet. Another book that I need to reread is A Heart So Fierce and Broken by Bridget Camera. This is an arc that I got in 2019. I did read it and I loved it. This is the sequel to A Curse So Dark and Lonely, which I really enjoyed as well. I know that a lot of people loved the first book and were disappointed by the second. I am not those people because I loved the second book in the series. I loved the main character in this one because we swivel the POV to a character of the first book that we didn't really look into too closely in the first book. So I loved this one, and we have new characters and a bookish character, and this was so good. But I don't really remember much of the plot, except that I loved it. So I really want to reread this and then continue on and finish the series, which I haven't in the past. So this is something that has been on my mind for a very long time. And yeah, my heart really needs to get back to these characters. These Infinite Threads by Tahara Mafi is the sequel to This Woven Kingdom, and This Woven Kingdom was just released in Germany, which brought this back to my attention, even though I've been meaning to get to this again for quite a while. I think I got this for my birthday last year, so it's been a while since I've been reading this series, and the final book in this, the third book, it just came out, and again, it looks beautiful. I really want to get to it, so I do need to get to the sequel before I am allowed to buy that book. So this is a story of a djinn who is undercover as like a housemaid or something. I'm not really sure of the details anymore, but she is kind of trying to keep a low profile and live in a world where djinns are prosecuted and killed. And the person who is after her is the prince himself, because there has been a prophecy about him that has to do with djinns. So their paths cross, and the story is great. I loved it, and the ending was very much Yes, please. So yeah, need to get to this one. Next up, we have a couple of series that I've been meaning to get back to. I'm not sure why I never did go back to them. I know I started this one, and I know I was kind of disappointed by the first book of this one, but it still intrigues me. So let's start with this one, Joe Abercrombie's Before They Are Hanged. This is the second book to The Blade itself, which is of course the first Law series. I thought the first book was kind of you notice that it was like a setup for a big series. It took a while to get started. I wasn't as enthralled by one of the characters that everybody else seems to be. Everybody, when they talk about this book, talk about this one character who is a torturer. I wasn't the biggest fan of him. Might have been because I was listening to the audiobook, and the audiobook was kind of for this one, so I might go ahead and not use the audiobook for this one, just in order to maybe love this character a bit more. Next up, we have two books by Sebastian de Castell. I want to get back to these stories because I just bought a new book by him, which is Crucible of Chaos, and I already had The Malevolent Seven on my TBR as well, so I need to get back to reading his books if I keep buying them. With both of these, I really enjoyed the first book in the series. This is a YA fantasy about a very unique set of magical rules and a character who seems in the beginning to not have a grasp on his magic, which is very embarrassing for him. Then certain people come into his life and it all gets tangled up. That's all I remember. Need to remember what the first one is about so I can continue with this one. I have all of the books of the series on my shelf, and it's like 6 or something, plus a spin-off. And then we have the second in a 4-book series, which is Knight's Shadow, which is the second book after The Traitor's Blade in the Greycoats series. This is about a kingdom where the last king had a very elite group of fighters and warriors, so they are the Greycoats. And when the last king fell, they basically lost their job, and now they are out there kind of looking for work, and they get roped into this big epic thing that brings a lot of trouble for the main character, who is not really happy to be dragged back into this kind of work, if I remember correctly. That's something that I can say about a lot of these books, if I remember correctly. Another stack of books, another stack of sequels that I mean to get to. The next sequel is Love Will Tear Us Apart by C.K. MacDonald. This is the third installment in the Stranger Times series, which is about a newspaper who publishes things like, what about the Loch Ness Monster? The reporters, of course, don't believe in any of it until some of these things try to kill them. It's a very funny series. It has very much the British humor down, and I really enjoy it. I don't tend to gravitate towards continuing with these, but my colleagues at work, they love these. Every time they talk about it, I'm like, yeah, I wanted to continue with this one. Next up, we have the next book in the Wayward Children series, Come Tumbling Down by Shannon McGuire. This is a fantastical story about kids who went through doors and found themselves in other worlds. Some were very fun worlds, some were very terrifying worlds, but they all ended up back in our world, and all of them want to go back. They all want to find another door to their world, and they all come to this school where they are trying to get them to realize they need to stay in this world. This series is very different from other series because we always have one book set at the school and the things that happen there, and the following book is set in one of the worlds and shows us the story of one of the characters. I'm not sure what this one is. I'm just gonna go in blindly and see what character we follow. These are very short, very fun reads, so yeah, want to continue with this one. Next up, we have a book that has very much not been well received by anyone I've talked to, and that is Iron Flame. I have started it, I put it aside and was kind of like, okay. When this first came out, I needed to get my hands on it because I loved Fourth Wing. It wasn't like the best story ever. I think I said it put all the things that I love about fantasy into one book, but it wasn't like the most unique story because we've all read it before. But I did love it, and so I was really happy to continue with this one, but this just was very underwhelming. The beginning of it was very much teen drama, which I don't really need, but I do think that I want to continue with this series, and if I don't get to it soonish, I might not get back to it until like the next book in the series is coming out, which I don't know when that is because I really don't care anymore. Next up, we have The Queen of Nothing by Holly Black. I don't know why I never finished this series off. It's such a short book. Maybe because I didn't love the first 2 books. There were some things, some lines crossed with the morally gray characters that I didn't really approve of, that I thought went a bit too far. Again, I just wasn't really that much invested. There were some people who were like, this is their whole personality, the series. That wasn't me. But I have had this series on my shelves for forever, and this would actually be a final book to a series that I could read during next week. I know that there's a spin-off of it, there's like a short story collection and stuff, but the series is completed with this 3rd installment. I do have another stack here. This is a stack of books where I read the first book, and I'm not sure if I can read the sequels if I don't reread the first book in this, or the second book in the series, whatever comes before the one that I haven't read yet. Pretty sure that I need to reread the books that I've already read in order to continue on, but I might just flip through them and then remember enough to continue on without having to reread it, because that takes a lot of time, and like, who has the time? The first book is This Vicious Grace by Emily Thide. I just got the sequel, and if you've seen my book haul for this, I'm gonna link it up above, you will notice I have no idea what this was about. Nope, I did not annotate it. I thought I did. Nope, I did not. So I will probably have to reread this, but I will try not to. And I will not butcher the synopsis again like I did in the haul. No. Next up, we have these beauties, and that is Blood and Honey by Shelby Mahurin and Gods and Monsters. And these are the sequels to Serpent and Dove, which I loved. I reread it again when I first read Blood and Honey, which I think felt like a very different book to the first book in the series. I don't really remember much of this one, so I'm not sure if I can go into this one without having to reread at least the second book, because I remember the first book. I don't remember this one. Story about a witch and a witch hunter. They get married, even though they hate each other. They fall in love. Next up is another series that I just hauled the last book of, and that is The Bone-Shot Daughter and The Bone-Shot Emperor. I really enjoyed this one. I think I gave it 4.5 stars, I think. I loved the animal companion in this one. I remember the ending. I remember parts of the plot. I don't really remember too much though of like the subplots in this, so I'm not sure if I would know what the hell is going on with this one. I might just try to start this and see if I'm lost. If I'm lost, I can still go back and reread this. If I'm okay with it, I can just continue on with this one. Really enjoyed it though. And I just hauled, like I said, the 3rd book in this series. And the last series that I have to show you that I might want to get back into soonish is The Final Strife by Sarah Al-Arifi, and the sequel is The Battle Drum. I've had this since it came out and I don't remember anything. I know it has to do with, is it their blood? I think their blood is red and blue. Is it? I'm not even sure about that. Yes, that's all I remember. Yeah, I really need to reread this. I just noticed I really need to reread this. But I did annotate this one, so I might need to just go back and look at the things that I thought were important while reading it the first time, and maybe I don't really need to reread it. Maybe things will come back to me once I look at it. So those are the books that I want to read for the final book support group next week. There's still time for you to participate if you want to. Like I said, I link everything down below, and let me know down in the comments which of these series I should prioritize, and if you are up to date with all of your series, or if there is 1 or 2 or maybe 1,000 that you still need to continue, and which of them you prioritize. And until next time, I hope you have all the great reads, hopefully sequels. Bye!